You are listening to the Cattle Call podcast. This is the place where computer-aided design and drafting meets humor and practicality, with a touch of business acumen thrown in for fun. Jim and Rocco, the owners of Zen-Tech Consultants, the premier U.S. technology consulting firm for architecture, engineering, construction, and manufacturing, discuss the fascinating world of CAD with some humor and some honesty. The Cattle Call podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Cattle Call podcast with Jim and Rocco from Zen-Tech Consultants. I am Jim.
And I'm Rocco.
Are you sure? He's always so... Man, you know I'm going to do that, and you still always are off key, man. You got to step your timing up. All right, so luckily with us today we have a guest.
What's going on?
What? Welcome to the real world, Rocco. Hello. Sorry to wake you up, man. More coffee in your system. Let's get it. You're embarrassing me. You have a guest in today, and you're making me crazy, man. That's all right. But luckily, our guest today is Kim Fuhrman, our recurring architectural specialist and expert in all things BIM and architecture related. How are we doing today, Kim?
Hi, guys. I'm doing great. How are you?
Good, right? Now regretting that you agreed to come back on, aren't you?
Not at all. You know, this is my fourth podcast with you guys. So I'm, if you weren't kind of off the rails from the beginning, I would think there was something wrong.
That's very true. That is probably sums up Rocco and I better than anything I've ever heard. We live off the rails. Oh, excellent. So yeah, we do appreciate you coming back to help us out with today's topic.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and so everybody knows today we're going to be talking about rendering options for architecture and architectural models. So that's why we have Kim in here. So before we get into this, Kim, why don't you tell folks a little bit about yourself, your background, what you do, right, and then why you're here.
Yeah. So I've been in the architecture industry for over a quarter of a century, which makes me sound really old. And I've done a lot of work, actually started in doing some renderings for a firm. Oh gosh, it's been 13 years since I started doing renderings in Revit. And so grew up with the industry and all learning about all the technology and things that are out there. It has really amazed me how the industry has changed over the last 20 some years, and all the technology that we have now. So I'm also, of course, president of AUGI, and we are, the world's largest CAD and BIM user group. We're an online forum, and we have users from all around the world in all different software platforms. So a lot of exciting things happening with AUGI lately, and we're looking for good things to come in the next few years as well.
Excellent. And that's AUGI. Right? We won't say what the acronym originally stood for, but it's just, I like to say it because now we can't say what your acronym was, which we're used to, and now it's just like AUGI. Just make sure people know where you are and how to find you.
Yes, it is just AUGI.
Just AUGI. That's all you are.
Right.
See? All right. So today, like I said, we're talking about rendering, right? We're talking about, the rendering options that are available for folks out there in the architectural world. And there are a lot of, 3D and BIM systems out there, and there are, 100 or more, at least, rendering systems of, varying degrees of functionality, right? So we couldn't possibly cover all of those. So instead, we're going to focus on kind of the big name design and rendering systems, and the benefits and the drawbacks and the concerns and the problems that you can face in using those. But before we get into any of the system specifics, right, I wanted to get into the general concepts behind architectural rendering. So, Kim, we know that, rendering can be really helpful with, presentations and marketing and sales, and I think, though, it can have design benefits as well. So, what do you see as the biggest benefits of renderings as they relate to the actual design itself?
Yeah, so when I think of rendering, what I think of is a picture. And so what the rendering does is it gives us a sense of scale and perspective. We can put lines on paper all day long, but if we don't know what those lines are going to do out in the field, if we don't know what it's going to end up looking like ahead of time, then, that process is kind of futile. So just being able to see, and especially important for, architects are kind of a different breed anyway, because they tend to be able to think and
we can go with that
and visualize, but if we're presenting to a client, or if we're presenting to say at a public meeting, or depending on the forum, we need to be able to communicate what our design is going to look like. And so rendering gives us that ability to be able to put our design into a picture that people can understand.
Right. And that's really important, I think you make a great point, right? The visualization of your model, it really helps all of the invested parties, like you said, whether it's the public or the owner or, trade contractors, whoever it might be. It helps them visualize, and on the design, it helps you make sure that everything is, looking and working and reacting to each other in kind of the way that you expect, right?
Sure.
And like you say, right, at the end of the day, the 2D plans and even a non-rendered 3D model, it can only give you so much information, right? We're visual creatures, right? So,
Sure.
we sort of, like you said, architects and designers like us, we've been doing this for so long, we can kind of take the line work, the 2D plans, and visualize, right? But, at the end of the day, right, you're having to depend on the imagination of everybody who's reviewing that design, right? So, and if you've got 5 different people looking at the plans, you're going to get 6 different visualizations, right? That's just the way it's going to go, right? Nobody's going to agree, and then everybody's going to be like, well, that's not what I thought it was going to be, right? And a simple rendering, right, can eliminate a lot of potential confusions and misunderstandings, that can lead to expensive, change orders and even lawsuits down the road, right? So it can definitely have benefits.
Sure.
So to kind of go back to something you were saying earlier, I think there's been a shift in the way that the architectural world approaches renderings. Right? When it first hit the market, there was they were considered that's not really necessary and it's too expensive for smaller projects, even medium-sized projects at that time. What do you see as the current stance for most of the architectural people that you deal with?
Yeah, I think from what I've seen, there's a happy medium, and it really depends on who the audience is for the renderings. Very simple renderings, especially if you're working with clients in a schematic design, very early design, you really don't want to get into very detailed renderings. First of all, they're time consuming, and secondly, the client could look at these renderings in a very complete state and feel like maybe they don't have input into the project. They could look at a very complete rendering and say, oh, well, you've already made these decisions, or you've already done, X, Y, Z. And, you want to be able to find that kind of balance and maybe pull back a little bit on the renderings. I worked with an architectural firm that actually still did hand sketches as renderings for the initial design phase. They were very simple. They were, very clean sketches, and they didn't have a lot of time invested into them, at the beginning stages of the project. Okay, now if you're looking at marketing materials, if you're looking at something, that's going to be in print, or, anything along that line, then you can put more time into a detailed rendering, maybe later in the project when things are more set in stone, if you will.
That's actually interesting. I'd never thought about that before. That's I can definitely see that, right? If you go in with the rendering too early, you're kind of telling people that, hey, this is done and I don't want your input. Interesting.
Right.
I hadn't thought about that.
Right.
So, from my standpoint, what I've seen, I have to say, the availability and the pricing on rendering software, that's come down pretty dramatically in the last 5 years or so. What was once a really expensive platform is really now within the reach of most architectural firms. and most of the major architecture BIM design systems, like Revit or BricsCAD BIM, they have at least some type of built-in rendering capabilities, right? And like I said, they may not be, professional level photorealistic rendering tools, but they can certainly provide, quick and dirty, presentations right inside the software that people already own. Right? And that makes it, I think, a lot more cost-effective and easier to use because you're using one set of tools. So, Rocco, let's wake you up. Did you get your coffee in? Can we talk to you now?
Huh?
Yeah? No? Troublemaker.
Is your power still on?
Is your power still on? Right. All right. So, how much interaction do you get here at Zentech, right? With folks who are looking for help with renderings, whether it's training them on how to use the software, or are they looking for actual help from someone like Kim to actually do the renderings for them?
Yeah, well, we're all about honesty here, right? Especially on this podcast. And to be honest with you, it hardly ever comes up.
Okay.
And I think that it's a big part. It kind of ties into what Kimberly was saying, and is that a lot of people see it kind of as the end phase, the end goal, and we all know how tight margins are within architecture. So the last thing that architects want to add on is an additional cost, especially at the end phase. So I don't see enough of it's kind of like the pretty thing to add on, on top of the cupcake, but it's not something I see that a lot of people ask for.
Okay. All right. So then Kim, in terms of the amount of work and the effort that you see, in your daily working with AUGI, how much focus do you see architects putting on renderings? I mean, are they focused on, like Rob was saying, those presentation quality outputs for marketing, sales, kind of at the back end, or do they find that like in system renderings through Revit and so on systems suffice for most of the design questions?
Yeah, I think it is, again, it really depends on the projects. A lot of the projects that I worked on that look for renderings or that need renderings, interestingly enough, around this area are nonprofits, and they're using renderings in their sales or in their fundraising.
Okay.
And so, they'll put them on signs or they'll put them on, brochures, for fundraising efforts. And at that level, I tend to look at the generalities. Is that the right word? General. Yeah.
I like it. I'll go with it. I'm not going to call
okay.
it.
Yeah. I just, I want to give them a sense of what the building looks like. I don't want to give them too much detail because then again, you get into kind of that liability of, well, here's the rendering and here's the building, but they don't look alike. Right. So, maybe the colors are different or something has changed in the design.
And people start getting that attitude of, you lied to me.
Yeah, right. So it's finding that happy medium and, what they need to suit their purposes, versus giving them, everything detailed down to the last electrical outlet or whatever. So, I think that the renderings tend to be an afterthought, with architects, because they'll get into a project and they'll say, oh, we should have a rendering for this, and then it's okay, let's, we'll add this rendering in. I really think that up front, if this is something that the architect or the client wants, or, if they're going to be, especially with, if we're working with nonprofits and doing, fundraising, that should automatically be just a part of the scope of work is to add in, the renderings. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good points. All right. So then I think that right here, we're going to take a quick break to hear from today's sponsor. All right, and then when we get back, we're going to get into some of the software and processes that we use for the architectural renderings. All right, folks, we'll be back in just a minute with more of the Cattle Call Podcast. All right, everybody, today's podcast is being brought to you by BricsCAD. BricsCAD, the AutoCAD alternative that will give you all of the tools that you need in the AutoCAD design world but in a simpler, more affordable package. In particular, today's session is being brought to you by BricsCAD BIM, the 3D modeling system that is the BricsCAD version of Revit. It actually allows you to go in and do all of your 3D modeling, all of your BIM intelligence in your standard DWG file. So you can do your 2D layout and drafting using all the same tools that you have and easily convert those over to full 3D models, and then add in and automatically using artificial intelligence convert all of that data into fully developed BIM models to the level of development that you need. BricsCAD BIM, probably the greatest advent into the BIM world in the last decade. So Rocco, tell the kind folks how they can reach out to us and how they can get more information about BricsCAD BIM.
Sure, you can reach out to us at zentechconsultants.net. That's ZENTEK consultants.net. Or you can give us a ring, 866-824-4459. And how about I'll give you an email address too. It's sales@zentechconsultants.net.
All right, lots of ways to reach out to us about BricsCAD BIM. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Cattle Call Podcast. And we're here once again with our favorite guest, Kim Fuhrman. See, this is me kissing up so that you keep coming back. So
yeah, I'm your favorite, but you spelled my name wrong on our little outline here.
I did not. It's just bad. That's bad typing. Wow. I know how to spell your name. And so, listen, you're lucky if I know how to spell Jim. Okay,
all the time.
I just badly typed it. All right, so I'm just an idiot.
It's all right.
That's all right.
Everybody else can see it.
That's it. Everybody else expects it from me. All right, but Kim, misspelled Fuhrman, is helping us today work through the best processes and avoid potential pitfalls of the architectural rendering world. And in the first half, or not in the first, excuse me, in this half of the broadcast, I want to get into some of the actual software and the processes and what Kim recommends for our listeners. So Kim, let's start with Revit itself, right? That's the leading 3D system out there, and I know it has built-in rendering features. How do those work, and do you think that they're sufficient for most people's needs, or do you think that they need to look at a more advanced rendering software?
Yeah, so the easy answer is yes.
Okay, thanks, we're done.
Yeah, so Revit itself, just in the last few years, I know they've updated their rendering engine. They're now just using the Autodesk Ray Tracer rendering engine, which is greatly improved, and you can get some good quality renderings out of Revit. The key is having the model set up correctly, using good materials in your families, and getting the lighting correct, especially if you're doing some interior renderings. Those can be pretty tricky in Revit. But there are also a lot of good third-party software applications that we can use to do even higher quality renderings. So again, it depends what you're looking for, what type of output you're looking at, and exactly what you hope to accomplish with it.
Okay. All right. So and in my mind anyway, and again, it's just because I haven't done rendering in so long. Built-in rendering engines, I tend to look at them as being, useful, but probably not what you're looking for real quality output. Like I said, I haven't done it in a few years, so I'll defer to you on that.
There's, if I can, sorry to interrupt, but there's one of my favorite architects, Stephen Schell, out in Arizona. He does all of his own renderings, and he uses only Revit. And, so shout out to Stephen, because he has really kind of tapped into that magical energy that Revit really has that most people, kind of overlook. And so, definitely check out his renderings. He does a great job just with Revit, and he does it all himself. He doesn't have CAD techs or BIM techs working for him. So he's kind of a cool guy.
Nice.
For sure.
So it shows you can actually adapt it and get some, something with a little more oomph, right?
Absolutely.
That's going to catch some attention, right? So, if you're looking to do like a nice write-up on the AUGI website, right, you can, get a nice rendering to kind of showcase what your skills are there. All right.
Sure.
So, all right. So, thinking about it, I mean, for me, again, I'm older and I haven't done Revit for a while.
Yeah,
I'm really old. I'm old as dirt. You know that. So, the big tool for a long time was, 3ds Max, right? But it had this reputation for being real tough to learn, difficult to work with, glitchy, and it certainly wasn't cheap. And as I understand it, right, the use of that system has actually fallen off quite a lot in the last years in favor of more of the built-in rendering engines. And Kim, I know you've told me, right, you're not an expert with 3ds. But what have you heard and seen in terms of how folks are using or not using what was once really the big name in the rendering field?
Yeah, so actually what I did was actually pulled up the 3ds Max website this morning just to take a look at how, what it's being used for. And really it looks like, the architectural renderings are just a small part of the 3ds Max kind of modeling now. It's more geared toward animation and effects and gaming and things like that. So while you can still use it for architectural rendering, I think personally, I feel that it's kind of, not to downplay any software, but I feel it's too complicated for what I need, and I know that there are other programs out there, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, which are super simple,
right,
and give great results. So,
yeah, and that's kind of the feedback that I've heard for folks too. Yeah, that the 3ds it's a great system, but it's kind of overkill for what we're talking about here today.
Right.
It's very expensive because it does a lot more. And there's a lot that you really have to deal with and work with that in just trying to do a still frame architectural rendering type of structure, not really what you want to deal with.
Right. And you don't need it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Why if all you need is a bicycle, right? Why are you buying a steam train? It's not necessarily what you got to go with there. So,
right.
All right. So there's, to my mind again, there's been one particularly big name that has just really jumped to the fore recently in the world of architectural rendering, and that's Enscape. And as I understand it anyway, and I haven't worked with it, it's supposedly it's much easier to use, and it lends itself not just to like still shot renderings, but it's also got very nice AR and VR functionality built into it as well, right? And so I think it also includes things like seasons and sun settings, so you can set like real world environments and whatnot for your rendering scenes. So can you take us through the basic concept of how you would go about rendering a scene in Enscape, and what are its big benefits, and what do our listeners need to watch out for when they're working in Enscape? Where is it limited?
Yeah. So the thing I love about Enscape is that it is a real-time rendering program. So I can have Revit open with the model on one screen and have Enscape open on a second screen, and as I'm making changes in Revit, I can see those changes in the rendering. I can navigate in Enscape just as if I'm, kind of moving around my model, and the images that you get out of Enscape are very realistic. It has its own content. So, how Revit has the RPC content, which is okay for some things. When you install Enscape, you actually also get, some of the content library. So you can actually import Enscape trees or Enscape furniture, or Enscape people, and, really have a higher quality rendering. Like I said at the beginning, what I like about it is I can make changes in my model, and my Enscape rendering updates instantaneously. So it's great for that design kind of level where you're trying things, or you're changing materials and colors and things like that. You can see those changes right away. You don't have to wait for this thing to bake and then give you a result.
Yeah, and that was always a big part of the rendering struggle, right? Is that you would make a change, then you'd have to rerun it again, wait 30 minutes, right, and make a change, run it again, and it got better and better. But
it would take hours.
Yeah,
when I first started rendering, I did a rendering one time for an architect, and it ran overnight.
Oof.
That's how long, we would just hit the render button and just leave for the day and come back the next day. And the funny part was I took this rendering then into the architect to review, and it was for a church building, and I had put people into, of course, the rendering, and there was this couple walking into the church, and it looked like the guy had his hand on the girl's backside. So
doesn't really fit with the church motif.
Right. So I just remember the architect just laughed, but it was a waste of an overnight rendering.
Yeah.
So
they did chew up time.
I kept that one.
That one was worth sharing with everybody. I like that. Those are funny.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, so to be able to see in Enscape, I could have picked that out right away. Rather than waiting for an overnight thing. So.
And that works brilliant. I mean, it's exactly what we're talking about, right? That when you're dealing with a rendering, what you're looking for is to be able to see, issues and conflicts. And as an architect, part of it is, you can't discount, color and material and presentation,
right.
And you think things are going to look good, and then when you look at it, you go, ooh, that's not what I was really hoping for. And right. You can just change that on the fly with a tool like Enscape and go, oh yeah, that's the finish that I wanted. That's what I was looking to get.
Right.
So it really does have big benefits. So, so let's bring Rocco back in here again. So, Rocco, what software do you see that most folks are using for rendering when you're talking to architectural clients, right? Is Enscape growing, or do you still see a lot of folks working on 3ds, or are there other packages we haven't gotten into?
I hear a lot about folks starting to use Enscape. I know that Enscape is part of the BricsCAD portfolio of products at some level as well. Lumion, you hear folks using Lumion. I would say that those are probably the 3ds Max, what's built into Revit, Lumion and Enscape. So it's those four. I don't think any others really come to mind. You hear much more.
Twinmotion is another one.
Twinmotion, yeah, I've heard of Twinmotion too. That's for actual virtual twinning and stuff. That's a little bit more extensive. We'll have to do a podcast on that one of these days to really explain, because I only barely understand what twinning is. So you get somebody to really explain that to me at some point. So because I'm just not that smart of a guy. We all know that. Obviously, I can't even spell Kim's name correctly after having worked together for ages. So, all right, what can I tell you? So, all right, so Kim, let me throw one more question at you here. So, from a design standpoint, like regardless of whatever rendering engine people choose to use, what would you say are the most important things you can do when modeling in the modeling side, right, to set yourself up for the best rendered output possible?
Yeah, so even going as basic as the hardware that you're using, the graphics cards that you're using, they have to be fit to the software, whatever software program you're using. Otherwise, you won't get good results. But as far as the model itself, I'm always one to, like we talked about earlier, keep it simple sometimes. And the cleaner your model is, I think the better your renderings are going to be. I think that setting it up, depending, there again, I hate to be wishy-washy, but depending on, what you're using it for, if you set your model up on actual coordinates for your site, and then you start playing with the lighting, you're going to get almost realistic effects as far as, where your building is located, how the sun's going to hit the building, what the shadows are going to look like. And so, it can be used for analysis. You can use it for coordination, and the closer your model is to actual construction, I think, the better the rendering is going to represent what might actually happen in the field. So I think, renderings are so much fun because you can go from, just as like I said, a sketch, all the way to like photorealistic renderings and, even into animations and so forth. So, it really, really depends what your what you're trying to communicate and who you're trying to communicate that to.
Okay. That's a good answer. And I will say, I think that's a great point that you make. One thing that does very often, particularly in the architectural world, right? I tend to work, my background is all in the civil. So for me, I am all about location and geo-referencing and, doing all of those things, right? I'm all about that. But, I have to say that, with the geo-referencing your buildings, and putting them on the real site and getting the surrounding information. And even if you're just going to do, the surrounding buildings, right? You're going to put the detailed rendering on your own building. But even if you just do, rough massing using, whether it's, BricsCAD Shape or Google SketchUp or whatever, to just mask the surrounding building or form it, right? There are dozens of tools for that. That you can pull up, and then when you're in the real location, the shade and sun and tree cover in the real world are going to have a major impact on your final design and what it will really look like. So I think that's a really important point. I'm glad you brought that up. So
yeah, absolutely. Right. And I also have quite a few years of civil design experience. My experience is not all architectural, so I have been to the dark side and I have returned.
I have been to the dark side, liked it, and stayed. So that's where I live. So, all righty. Nice. So I think we can wrap it up there. All right. So, well, there you have it, folks, right? That's architectural rendering. Completely simplified, courtesy of our favorite architectural technologist. So I want to thank Kim for coming back and helping us out yet again, despite the fact that she knows how goofy Rocco and I are and that we are always off the rails. She keeps coming back, and we do appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys for having me.
Thank you.
And
it's always a great time.
Excellent. And again, we will have Kim back for more stuff in the future. So I want to thank you again. And all right, folks, we will catch you next time on the Cattle Call Podcast. All right, everybody. Today's Cattle Call was brought to you courtesy of Zentech Consultants. That's Rocco and I. Zentech Consultants works with design and manufacturing firms to help our clients purchase and implement the software that they need in these complex industries. We provide a single point of contact for clients to buy, develop, and learn the most vital software systems for your specific needs. Zentech strives to be your trusted technology partner from your initial needs all the way through long-term support and training for your entire staff. So Rocco, why don't you tell them how to reach out to Zentech?
All right, yeah, you can reach out to us through zentechconsultants.net. You can email us at sales@zentechconsultants.net, or you can even call us 866-824-4459.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing from you all.